Straw bale walls combine really well with roundwood timber frames. It's the ability to sculpture the curves into straw bale. Kind of gives the same feel that you get from the natural curves in the roundwood. These bales are barley straw. They were put aside in a barn for a year to compress before being used in this building. And then they have 3 coats of lime on top. First a hurling coat which kind of splatters the bale, and then a coat mixed in with horse and cow hair, and then a final lime putty and sand coat on top. And this goes off into a very hard wall, but you really get the nice forms and shapes of the straw beneath. Obviously it has very high insulation qualities, and it also gives great depth to the walls, which makes it perfect for a window seat. This is typically 1 bale high from the floor to the bottom of the window seat, and it's just the right height for sitting and enjoying the view. The gable end of this building has a lime plastered wall as opposed to being timber clad. This forms a fire break from other buildings around it, and it also makes a nice contrast to the roundwood, having the timber cladding coming down one side and then emerging into a round pole and then coming out the other side into a finished lime plaster. And these buildings need to breathe. They're all made of natural materials, insulation's designed to breathe, so any moisture can escape out of the building, work its way out through that lime. If this had been a cement wall, it would have trapped the moisture inside, and that causes problems to timber further down the line. We're having a week of clay this week, and we're starting to mix up an adobe mixture for the floor around the fireplace end of the building, and also to make the mortar for the cordwood walls we're building on this curve. So this is clay that has been dug out from where somebody was building a barn nearby. They needed to dig out into the side of the hill, and this clay came out. It looks fairly sandy when you look at it, but it's actually got a very high clay content, and the sand will help it all bind together when we actually mix it up. So we take the clay from here, and it goes onto these tarps. We add a fair bit of water and a bit of chopped straw. So Nick's puddling away with the clay mix here and just working it with his feet. And what that's doing is it's breaking down all the lumps of clay in here and mixing them thoroughly with the sand and the straw to get a really good consistency of an earth plaster here. So this type of daub mix becomes a very sticky clay-based mouldable plaster that you can either use on walls or between logs in a cordwood wall, or as a base for when we're building floors and we're putting in an adobe floor here as well as a cordwood wall. This is absolutely ideal. What you want is to see that sticking to my hand. It's got a good clay content, and yet at the same time you can roll it and create a fairly malleable ball which you can then shape as you want between different parts of the walls. And once we've got this all finished and down to a nice texture, we'll then move it and put it into the floor where we've got shuttering set up, and the floor will be built up with a series of layers. And then we'll finish it off with some slip coats of very fine clay and water which we can smooth in, because as it dries it will be some natural cracking, and these slip coats will sort of smooth out all the final cracks. And once it's fully dry we'll then seal the whole floor with a few coats of linseed oil. Should come up a lovely colour with this clay. I'm just pointing up the cordwood walls. These are made from western red cedar and Lawson, which has already been seasoned. Basically we cut the logs to 18 inches, that's the thickness of the wall, and then pack in a clay and sandy cob mix in between, mixed in with a bit of chopped straw to bind it, and I'm just filling in any cracks as it dries out. You have to put on a number of slip coats just to fill in these finer cracks that appear between the logs. The reason we use seasoned timber in it is because these will shrink, and if you were to use green logs they would shrink down and you'd get quite a gap at the top of the wall. Over time They will need a little bit more pointing and adding of clay, but once it's fully dried out, it should need no more maintenance. The battening is fairly conventional, working at set distances apart up the roof. The only place we have to alter this is as we go around the corners or as the actual shape of the roof changes. As we work round over the top of this cordwood wall and the roof kind of kicks down into a sweeping tail, we're having to alter the battens quite considerably. One, to flex our way over the top of some of the curves, but also as we drop down, the battens lose their sort of symmetrical rows, and therefore we have to put in a lot of extra battens, cut them in, shape them, and as we're shingling we'll have to work them a bit more, chiseling bits out as we go. But the end result will be a sort of sweeping tail on the outside of the building here, which will not only protect the cordwood wall, but will give the building and the whole roof a real sort of sense of stability and depth. Here, coming to see Chris, who's making shingles for the woodland classroom at the Sustainability Centre. These are all handmade from western red cedar, locally sourced, and Chris has worked out his own methods of taking it from the butt through to the finished product, and he's making a fine lot of shingles for us.
I buy all the timber off of Cowdrey, which is the local estate. This is western red cedar. After they're cross-cut, they're put into these blocks. We clamp 3 at a time. I'm actually at the end of cutting the Sustainability Centre roof, and this is the last 5 blocks. When I actually start saw up in a minute, you'll see that it's a very simple technique. We just literally raise the block and that puts the taper onto the tile. And this will produce the shingle. That is the finished result. In there is 17,500 tiles, which is what the centre's requiring for the roof. I cut the tiles green. They'll go onto the roof relatively green, but they do, in essence, space themselves then. Now I've finished this, I can crack on with my house. So.
This is Chris and Lucy's roundwood timber frame house. They're building a self-built house for their family, and it's coming along really well. Hello folks, how are you? Hiya.
Can't wait to get in there, really.
Yeah, wander on in and have a look. Great to see the house at this stage where you can see the straw bale walls. Some of them have been clipped back, the others have got their first coat of plaster on, and different stages of it all coming towards fruition. It's getting closer to the end. One of the beauties of roundwood frames is that because there's no fixed structure of where walls are coming up off foundations, you can be really flexible with the design in here. So once you get to this stage, if Chris and Lucy decide they want to move their kitchen over there or they want to put a partition wall across, they can do it. There's no need to follow the exact footprint of the foundations. You can actually evolve the building quite a lot to how you want it when you get to this stage, and I think most people who are building their own house want that degree of flexibility.
I don't think there's a piece of timber here that's travelled more than 10 miles. It's look at it, it's beautiful. You have to think outside the box to build one of these houses. The nature of the structure itself, it's a round pole building. You do have to scribe and do various bits and pieces that you wouldn't have to do in a box. But when you see a round timber pole construction in a woodland situation, there is nothing else that you can put in an environment like this that just looks as though it's always been here. They're amazingly tactile buildings. They're made from local source timber. It ticks all the boxes.
This roof is quite different to a conventional roof for shingling, partly because we've steam bend the rafters. There's also a lot of curves that we've got to work round. So it's a little bit more challenging than most, but provided you follow the basic principles of shingling, which is to make sure at all times you've got a free shingle overlap. Every shingle that goes on must have at some point where that water runs off 2 other shingles underneath it. So we follow that pattern throughout. Now, because the roof curves, the shingles can't all be uniform and straight, so we're having to shave pieces off the shingles so they taper slightly as they come in and work their way up the roof towards the ridge. And as we get to the roof lights here, we're having to cut and shape